And I went to it and I found out about socially responsible investment. I didn't have a lot of money to invest, but I didn't want it going certain places. So we began putting little bits of money here and there in things like Pax World Fund, Working Assets, Parnassus Fund, some of the others, I don't remember them all. I think Calvert Funds was through the Presbyterian Church, I think, but I think they did fairly well. And over the years, I continued to be in contact with a little bit. Then fortunately, a couple of years ago, I was listening to our local progressive talk station, WCPT 820 AM, to Joan Esposito's program, and Alex Papadopoulos came on. And he specializes in SRA funds and also funds having to do with what's called ESG, environmental social governance. Now we have the ability to lobby Congress for laws on climate and trying to promote climate change through various things. But one of the other ways you can have an effect, possibly, hopefully, is to where you put your money. And if you can get companies to wake up and say, hey, you're not a good player, we're not going to invest in you, maybe it has some effect. I like to think that it does. So anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Alex, and he can talk about what he's doing, the current state of SRA, and particularly ESG, environmental, social, and governance screens that are put on investments. And so, Alex, introduce yourself and take it away. We're going to have questions after his opening remarks.
Sure, Mark and Bill, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your program. I've been following Indivisible for many years now, and thank you for having me. So, a little background about me: I'm a financial advisor for almost 25 years, and Mark, it's funny we didn't run into each other, but I started off at a storefront office in Evanston, Illinois, and I was much younger than I am today, and I was starting off new in the industry, and I would get a lot of clients coming through the door in Evanston asking me for socially responsible investments. And I was right on the campus of Northwestern, as I said, and I would get professors and grad students and people that lived in the area coming in and asking me to invest for them in a socially responsible way. And over time, I've become somewhat of an expert on doing that. And it's been a piece of my business for many, many years now. And Mark, back then, when people would invest socially responsible, we kind of knew that we would lag the indices. So, the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones, we would be able to compete with those indices, but generally we knew, not every year, but most years we might lag 2 or 3 or 4%, because there just weren't a lot of names, there weren't a lot of options back then. But if we fast forward to today, and most recently the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, with the price of solar panels and wind and renewable energy becoming more affordable, you're starting to see many, many socially responsible companies showing great profit. As we know, we're seeing more and more electric vehicles on the street. And then along with electric vehicles, there's all of the charging components that go with electric vehicles that we're starting to see more and more of spreading out all over the country. And so socially responsible investments are in many cases exceeded performance of the regular indices. And we've seen a lot of growth here in the last 5 to 7 years in socially responsible investments. And so 3 years ago, the premier body for socially responsible investing is called the USSIF, the United States Socially Investment Finance Committee. And what they do is they issued a designation called the Chartered SRI Counselor. I have this designation. Just to give you guys an idea, there's about 300,000 financial advisors in the country. Only 500 of us have this designation. It's not a very popular designation, but I would like to see that number grow. And that comes from the demand of everyday mom and pop investors who say, hey, I live my life in a responsible manner. I like to go shop locally. A lot of people go and do farmers markets. They do all of the things that are sustainable. And the next logical step in that would be to also invest your money in a sustainable way. And so what the original socially responsible investing can be traced back to the 1860s with the Methodist Church. John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist Church, and he had a famous sermon where he said, let us invest and make all that we can, but not at the expense of humanity and not at the expense of our souls. And so John Wesley is credited as being the founder of socially responsible investing. In the 1960s, we started to see a more formalized socially responsible investment movement. And like Mark said, there was 4 or 5 different fund companies that offered socially responsible investing. And that movement from the 1960s has morphed into the modern day ESG movement. And ESG, for those of you that haven't heard of it, stands for environmental, social, and governance. And so when we screen investments, we want to look at a company's performance and history on the environment. Are they scoring well on the environment? Are they polluting? Are they getting fined? We like to look at their social scores. Do they have diversified boards? And then the G for ESG stands for governance. And so we want to vote our proxies and get on boards and make companies hear us when we talk about climate change and social injustices. And so we've seen billions of dollars flow into ESG funds, and it's been very successful. And what you've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is you've seen a very organized pushback from the right that is attacking ESG. And you see a lot of different states are enacting laws where they don't invest in ESG. And so I would speculate the people that are behind that are going to be the companies that pollute, and they're seeing less inflows into their stock as compared to years back, because we have different ways that we can fuel our cars and our homes, and renewable energy is here to stay. And so we've seen this grand shift from fossil fuels to renewables. This trend is not going to stop. There's also, from a country standpoint, if you look at the war that in Europe with Russia, countries want to be sufficient when it comes to their energy. And for many, many years, we have received oil from a lot of bad players in the world. And so countries don't want to have to depend on different rulers that may or may not be there to get their energy. Countries want to be self-sufficient. And that's what you see now across Europe with Germany and Spain and England. And you're seeing more and more government funds flowing to renewables, wind, solar. And so this is not going to stop. This is here to stay. We're going to be getting attacked by the right. And to me, that shows that we're making progress and that we're doing the right thing. So what I'd like to do, wait, can I pause here and see if there's any questions, or if there's anything that anybody would like to ask?
Hi, my name is Colvin. Nice to meet you. I just wanted to kind of ask a question that I think we hear a lot of times from more conservative voices about ESG, is that it's going to impact seniors' retirement funds. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And is what truth, or is it smoke and mirrors when we're talking about things like this?
Great question. And that is definitely something that's being brought up by the right. And I would call that a scare tactic. There has been numerous studies on ESG, and I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and I will show you, what I think is the best study was conducted by Morgan Stanley. And so let me share my screen and I can answer your question here. Morgan Stanley, everybody's heard of Morgan Stanley, one of the largest investment firms in the world. They conducted a study on nearly 11,000 mutual funds from 2004 to 2018. And I will link this as well for everyone to see after the call. But the most important thing for people to know is that they saw in their study no financial trade-off in the returns of sustainable funds when compared to traditional funds, and they actually demonstrated lower downside risk. And so, you're going to hear these things from people from the right and experts where they just kind of shoot from the hip and they say what they think is correct. But as you guys know, when it comes to science, when it comes to anything, you have to do a true study and a true comparison before you can speak clearly on something like this. And so, a study like this over many, many years and over thousands of mutual funds show that there's no financial trade-off when it comes to ESG. And what I would say ESG does is it adds an extra layer of research for people's investments. And so the best way to look at it is if there were two companies, company A and company B, and the first company is getting fined because they're polluting rivers and they're polluting lakes and they're paying fines, they're getting sued, and the other company has a great record for the environment, and they're in the same industry, they're doing the same things. For me as an advisor, I'm going to stay away from the company that's getting fined and getting hit, right? Because at the end of the day, that's going to affect their stock price. That touches on the E letter of ESG, the environment. As we know, corporations only pay attention when something's going to hurt their bottom line, okay? And the best way for all of us to get Wall Street's attention is to invest in companies that score well on their ESG ratings. And so there's all kinds of different ways to invest in ESG. Some of our clients, we buy funds for them that are free of fossil fuels. That's a great way to invest in ESG. There's other ways where we do buy some fossil fuel companies, but we try to buy the fossil fuel companies that score better than others. Personally, I would like to avoid fossil fuel companies completely in our portfolios. That's the point of this. But there's different schools of thought, and we're open to investing in how people want. But this is an extra layer of protection for people's portfolios, because really at the end of the day, if a company is paying fines for environmental abuses, or they're getting sued because they don't have enough women on their boards or in their company, or people of color, that affects their bottom line. What also affects their bottom line is if they're not seeing the inflows that they used to see. And so as an individual investor, we think, okay, my little piece of the pie can't make a difference in this big financial world. But if you've ever seen a school of fish in the ocean, if we swim together and stay together, we're just as big as anybody else. And the truth is, retail investors, everyday mom and pops, which makes up the people that are on this call, that is who makes up the majority of the investment world. And so retail investors are such a big piece of the pie compared to any other investor. Now there's the institutions as well, but if we can continue to grow funds to move into sustainable investments, corporations will listen, and they are listening. As we stand today, every single company on the S&P 500 issues a sustainability report and a sustainability score. So you can look up the sustainability score of any company on the S&P 500. For me, that's a win because we're holding them to it. Wall Street, for the most part, is on board with this. You're seeing the pushback from the right. They think that they're going to get votes from this on the next election. They're using scare tactics as they usually do. But there's no truth to that. And so I hope that answered your question, Cole. But there's numerous studies that have shown there's no financial trade-off. Now, let me just speak to recent history. In the last year and a half, ESG funds they've kept up with the indexes, but they haven't done as well as they have in the last, say, 3 to 10 years. The main reason for that is most ESG companies today tend to be tech companies. If you look at, there's incredible technologies that are coming out on solar panels and wind and EVs and all of these components. These are all tech companies, and they mostly trade on what we call the NASDAQ. Well, tech companies tend to perform better in a flat or declining interest rate environment. And as we know, in the last 2 years, we've had really high inflation. And whenever rates are going up and we have inflation, tech companies tend to underperform because they usually don't have as much cash on hand. They tend to take out loans to create their innovations and to do all the things that they do. And so in a higher interest rate environment, that affects their bottom line. We think that we're near the end of this latest interest rate cycle. We think the Fed is not going to continue to raise rates. We think they're close to the end. And they're meeting again in about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. If they come out and announce, hey, we're not going to continue to raise rates, you will see technology and the NASDAQ start to go back up. And you'll also see a lot of the ESG names go back up as well. And so, again, you can't judge an investment by just a 6-month or 1 year or 2 year span. You got to look at it long term. And ESG has kept up and in many ways done better. So I hope that answers your question, Cole.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. What else? Is there any other questions, Mark?
Alex, let me put a disclaimer in here too. I've got a couple of financial advisors that I use, and Alex is one of them. So just so you know that I tend to appreciate where he's coming from, but if you want to look into it, it's all on you. So if anybody else is interested, they can go do what they want to do. But I need to add the disclaimer. So now I've done that. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Let's see.
Here's a question from Judith. How can one cut through misleading PR that some companies put forth? For example, BP is a horrible polluter, agreed, but they claim to be very environmentally conscious in their advertising. These claims are obviously false, but I suspect that other companies might do things in more subtle ways. Judith, yes, a very good question. And so I would say the fact that BP is talking about this and trying to shape their, the way that we think of them is a sign that we're doing the right things with ESG, that they're concerned about how the public views their company in general. That's why I like to tell clients that, hey, let's just avoid all fossil fuel companies in general. That would be the best way to cut through some of the PR. Now, companies are going to release all kinds of things and try to shape the public view or public perception for them. But I agree with you that BP is a polluter. They've been a polluter for many, many years. They don't admit things until it's much, much too late. That's what companies do, unfortunately. And we have to be vigilant to try to make sure that we're holding their feet to the fire when they do these things. And so there's different kinds of ESG investing, like I said before. In some cases, when you have a portfolio where you're going to invest in oil companies, you try to invest in the companies that have the best score. I tend to not trust what they say and what they do. And so that's why I would recommend to avoid all fossil fuel companies in general. And that would be your best option.
We've got a hand up from Garrick.
Hi, Bill. Alex, I have two questions. You brought up BP, and I used to have stock in them, and like you, I sold that off. Around that time, I came across a company or an organization called Green America. Are you familiar with them?
I am not. No.
Okay. I have investments with them, and they invest in clean energy companies as well. And my first question is, besides them, are there other organizations or companies that would create a portfolio for clean energy? And then my follow-up question is, with this debt ceiling situation, how is that going to impact whatever investments we all have?
Sure. Okay. Yes, I can speak to both of those. So if you do just a quick Google search and you type in the letters ESG investing, you will get a bunch of information out there. There's two ways to invest in ESG. So if you feel comfortable enough to do it yourself, you could go to Vanguard, you can go to Parnassus, S&P. There's pretty much every investment firm out there will offer green investments. And so you could contact them either on their website or give them a call, and they're going to have green investments for you. However, as we know, there's not a ton of options out there, and people that invest tend to have some questions when they do that. And so the best way to know that you're working with somebody that's knowledgeable about ESG would be if you just Google chartered SRI counselor. That's the designation that I have, and there's 500 of us in the country. That would be your best bet to work with somebody that could put together a green portfolio for you that has this designation. So that's what I would suggest, is to make sure that whoever you're working with is a chartered SRI counselor. This is the same body that issues the CFP, the Certified Financial Planner designation. And so I think that would be your best bet. If you need some help and you want someone to work with, I would tell you to look at that chartered SRI counselor designation. If you Google that, you'll get some names of companies and names of advisors that can do that for you. And then as far as the debt ceiling, I've been doing this for 25 years. I am nervous about what's going to happen. I do think that the House Republicans are going to play ransom with the worldwide economy. We may see where markets crash temporarily. They may try to see how far they can go with this, but ultimately they will have to raise the debt ceiling. There's no other option. I can't imagine a scenario where they actually completely go through with this. They're going to need 215 votes from the Republican side of the House to try to do something like this. They don't have 215. There's probably 10 or 30 House of Representatives, Republican House of Representatives, that are in swing districts that could not afford to be a part of whatever they try to do here with the debt ceiling. So I do think you're going to see some turbulence between now and when they ultimately pass it, but I'm not telling any of my clients to go to cash or to do anything out of the ordinary. We're going to ride this out, and hopefully sooner rather than later, they're going to raise the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling has always been raised, and you never know these days, but I don't think that Republicans are going to want to put their name to being the first ever time in history where the debt ceiling wasn't raised. I think it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting for sure.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're dealing with a Republican Party like we've known it. We're dealing with fascists, and I'm scared to death right now that they might just take us right over the cliff. And with that said, it's like, do you sell your stock off in fear of the whole market collapsing and take the cash, or just write it out? And I'm leaning with what you're saying, and that's just ride this out and see what happens. Yeah,
look, they need 215 Republican votes, to get this to do that. And I just don't see them. If you look at how many times it took for them to vote to get a leader of the House, I think they did, was it 5 or 7 times they had to vote just to get the leader? So they're not. I think it was 15. Oh, you're right. It was 15. I'm giving them a benefit of the doubt. So they're disorganized. I think that, within the Republican Congress, there's probably a group of 20 or 30 hardcore fascists, like you said, that have a lot of power, but I can't see the entire body voting for this and putting their name to it. Whereas the Democrats are very united, and the Democrats only need 5 Republicans to come over and vote with them to pass the debt ceiling. So, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. But I would tell you, stay invested. If you have money that you're thinking about investing that's not already invested, that's like in cash, I would tell you stay in cash until this is resolved to put any new money into the market. But it's very difficult to try to time these things and get in and out. If your portfolio is a good portfolio today and you're invested in good companies, we'll come out okay on the backside of this. The numbers for the economy look pretty strong. It looks like we're probably going to have a soft landing, and it seems to me like we're going to avoid a recession. But let's see. I think if this can get resolved, the debt ceiling, and if the Fed doesn't raise rates here in 3 weeks, you could see this market start to go up. And I do want to say one thing, and I don't want to be too political, but these are just facts. And I'll link this article as well. The stock market and the economy does do better under Democrats versus Republicans. This is a fact. No matter what they say, this is a fact, and I will link the article. And all you have to do is look back to the Clinton years and the Obama years, and the markets do well and the economy does well. Right now, I believe President Biden is cleaning up a lot of messes that were left for him, and coming off of COVID as well. But things are in place here where we could have another good run of 7 to 8 years of growth. So I hope that answers your. Yeah,
thank you.
So Alex, let me add something to what you just said. Our fiscal and financial guys run a monthly webinar, and I hope you can come on with them sometime, because that you're repeating exactly what they have pointed out, and they use the FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Data, which is hardly left wing, to point out the fact that Democratic administrations have done historically better than Republican ones for the economy. And why the Republicans get along with saying they're better for business, it's not true.
Well, you're exactly right. And what happens is when a Democrat is in office, generally speaking, we like to strengthen the lower and middle class. And when the lower and middle class gets stronger, we tend to spend what we have, and that makes the economy get stronger. Republicans tend to give breaks to the very, very wealthy and corporations, and that's good for the very wealthy and corporations, but it tends to bog down the economy in general. And so, this is just the way it is. And yes, they're always going to spin and say different things, but that's just not true. And I'm sure I'm sure on your other calls, you guys are dealing with
Oh, yeah.
misinformation all the time.
You're preaching to the choir to this group. We
Okay.
have a couple more questions here. Let's see. Judith says, I guess I'm asking, how do these filters work? And how can an investor know which measurements to trust when you evaluating a company? And there was a follow-up. Please repeat the designation. I'm assuming that has to do with the SRI financial advisors. So if you
Yes. Okay. Well, let me take the first question. The chartered SRI counselor, I'm going to link it here in the chat so people can see that. I would say that the best place to go, and I will link this as well, is everybody has heard of Morningstar. Morningstar is a great company. They do all kinds of ratings on investments. They have a sustainability rating score that they run. And I would say that would be the best place to go to look at sustainability scores for both for corporations and funds. Generally, what I like to tell people is when you invest in just one company, it tends to be higher risk. I'm a fan of investing in an index, a larger index, like the S&P 500. So Vanguard has a wonderful fund. It's called the Fossil Free S&P 500. I think that's a great starting point for people to look at. Vanguard, if you go on their website, they have a wonderful ESG rating system, and then Morningstar as well. So I'll link those for you guys to see. I hope that helps.
I don't see where the link is, but
here is the Morningstar sustainability ratings, and then the chartered SRI counselor is in there as well. But I think the whole point of ESG investing is letting Wall Street know that the general public cares about where their money goes and what their money does. And so we're seeing billions of dollars of inflows going into these types of funds. Even this past year, 2022, we saw billions of dollars go into ESG funds. And so most people want to grow their money, but they also want to do it in a way that's mindful of the environment and mindful of social issues. And so I think this is a great way to do that. I'd like to share, if I could, one page that talks about.
So Alex, we still don't see the links. So I don't know if Bill, is there a setting you can see that's not having it?
I put it in the chat.
It did.
Well, what if I could share my screen as well?
Yeah.
Please do that.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's
please do that. Yeah.
Uh,
Harriet wanted to know if you had any comments about Ibrahim Al-Husseini and his investment company. And I don't know if you want to get into specifics, but
I saw that. I'm honestly not familiar with that company or him, so I can't speak to that. But here is the link or the page that people can go to Morningstar and to look at the ratings and get a feel for how that works as well. If everyone can see that.
yep, well, that's coming up. Yeah, that's good. And I don't know, Harriet Dart has raised her hand. Harriet, do you want to unmute and do you have a question?
I was just going to comment that I had heard him at a keynote at a global conference yesterday, and that was it. So I'll Google him and find out more about him. And it was, he was very young and thought his place in the world was to make a lot of money, and then he went back to swim at one of his places, and the environment, it was gone. It's like, what's the point of having all this money if we've killed the planet?
Exactly. Okay. That's
yeah. So and yeah, with that, I have to leave, and I want to catch the rest on the recording. But thank you so very much.
Thanks for coming on, Harriet.
Yep.
Yeah, there was another comment about And I see that too, that the very wealthy, of course, don't care whether the markets go up or down. When they go down, they just have a lot of money in cash that they can invest and buy things when they're low. So, but I guess that's always there. But any comments on that? You can look at the question, I don't know, from Leslie Roberts over on the right.
Yeah, let's take a look at that question.
Oh, Carl, one of our financial guys is coming on. Oh, good. Hi, Carl.
Yeah, if I could just answer Leslie's question real quick here. And yes, so one of the things that the wealthy do and large institutions do is they do buy when the market crashes, and that's a buying opportunity for them. And they do a lot of that, what's called timing the market, trying to get in when the market's beat up or selling when it's high. For average everyday investors, and the data supports this, if you buy good funds and you stay invested, you will perform very well. It's very difficult to time the market for the average investor. It's very difficult to know when to get in and when to get out. But the studies show if you buy an S&P 500 index, or Vanguard has an ETF that's called Vanguard Total Index, where you're basically buying the whole market. If you buy and hold, the way Warren Buffett would say to do things, you're going to come out just fine in your 401k and retirement account and investment account. Now, there are some people who are advanced and like to go in and time the market and do that. But for the general public, I would advise against it. I would say to have a buy and hold philosophy, buy large indexes, and stay invested. Yes, the other thing I wanted to share with everybody, if I could share my screen again, is...
You can share your screen again.
So while he's doing that, Carl Faustich is on one of the leads of our financial and fiscal group. So Carl, Alex was just repeating what you've been pointing out all the time, that Democratic administrations tend to do better for the economy. So I just thought you would like to know. You're repeating what we know.
So I think this is an interesting piece for us to look at, and when we're talking about the environment, this to me is great news, and we're seeing that U.S. electricity from renewable energy beat coal and nuclear in 2022. Again, this is where the whole planet is headed. In many ways, Europe is ahead of the U.S. On a lot of this stuff. The main reason is because of the opposition from oil companies fighting this switch to renewable energy that we're trying to do. President Biden did pass, most of what he wanted to as far as renewable energy, but there's a lot more that needs to happen. But we're seeing a lot of great signs as far as our transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. I would imagine the scientists would tell us we're still way behind, and we're still in the dangerous zone here, but there are positives to this, and I do think that we can look at this as something that's a positive, and we can continue to move in this direction.
Is there an emerging technology fund or areas that you can invest in?
There is. What I'll do is I'll link that as well after the call, but there's a number of different ETFs that invest in emerging green technologies, and those are the ones that are exciting to me, because it is going to be technology that gets us to the next level on this. If you look at how we use fossil fuel, this is just an ancient type of a technology here. We've been using it for, the internal combustion engine is over 100 years old, and it's time to change how we do things. But yes, I will link after the call a couple ETFs that we use that focus on some of the leading indicators for green technology. One of the knocks on green technology that's actually used by former President Trump is that windmills kill thousands of birds, and windmills somehow are bad for the environment. And there are a lot of birds that get killed by windmills, but cats kill more birds than windmills do. But the point is, one of the emerging technologies with wind is instead of having your traditional windmill, it's a piece that kind of sticks straight up and just vibrates depending on how the wind is blowing, and that generates electricity. That's a really hot new way to generate energy from the wind. The other emerging technology is ocean wave technology, where they're collecting energy from ocean waves, and 60 to 70% of the planet is covered by water, and so that's another area where they're looking to put in these different units in the ocean that will collect wave energy as well. So there's a lot of new technologies that are coming out, and they're all green technologies, and we're just continuing to raise how we collect renewable energy. There's going to need to be improvements to the grid. I know California has a lot of problems right now where they just don't have enough charging stations for cars. But that's a good problem to have. It means that people are adopting this new technology. As we continue to move forward on this, we should see electric cars be more affordable for everyone. Right now they're pretty expensive still, but we should see that price point continue to drop. So let me see if there's any other.
There's a huge comment by Sonny Cohen, and Bill Davis also had his hand up. I didn't see it go up, but yeah, and from what I'm seeing, the whole the move to electrics is and alternatives is just really, we're just starting to scratch the surface. The national laboratories are doing some just amazing things, and we have no idea what they're doing, but if I could invest in those, I would. But
Yeah,
so do you see Sonny Cohen's?
I do. So let's look at that. So Sonny, I agree with you. I've had this designation now for the last 3 years, and I started our sustainable investing company officially 3 years ago, and I always try to stay away from politics in general, because I see it firsthand. I have clients who are both on the left and right, and they invest in ESG, and I've always tried to stay away from it. However, in the last year to 2 years, the attacks on ESG are coming from the right, unfortunately, and they get stronger and stronger. Governor DeSantis in Florida, he passed the law, I think just a couple of weeks ago, and it specifically was an anti-ESG law. And I agree with you that they try to portray this as a novel investment strategy, but again, this is misinformation, because ESG and socially responsible investing has been around for 50 years now. We have a broad body of evidence to look at the performance, and they're trying to dismiss it as something that's novel and something that's new, but it's been around forever. And so I'm glad that you bring that up, and I would like to share one more time my screen and share this with you guys, because there is something that's out there that speaks to this. And so, like I said before, the formal body for sustainable investing is the USSIF, and they put out something just recently that addresses a lot of the concerns that have come up, unfortunately, from the right. And so let's take a look at this real quick. These are 10 things to know about ESG and sustainable investing, okay? This is a great piece for everyone to look at. 85% of all investors are interested in sustainable investing. And so these are the facts. If you look at what the right is saying, they're going to try to say that this isn't mainstream America, but the truth is most people want to invest in a sustainable manner. Just like you said, ESG considerations are not about politics, it's about investment results. And so And there's a lot of data out there to support that the investment results are just as good as any other investment and many times better. The market has embraced these practices. And the market likes to make money. And it's not a coincidence that we're seeing all of these flows coming into ESG. If you look at this chart, sustainable investors are seeking investments in resilient companies. Again, these are facts, and we need to stick to the facts when we talk about this. And most importantly, for our call today, sustainable investing directly addresses climate change. And so if we can continue to promote these companies that are coming up with new renewable energy ideas, that's who we want to support, and we want to get off of the fossil fuels that we're on that are destroying the planet. So the US needs to be a leader. We're a little bit behind. Like I said, Europe is ahead of us on these things, but it's never too late for us to continue to push in this direction.
So Bill Davis had his hand up, and then Garrick and Sonny have their hands up. So,
okay.
I was just going to make a comment, and I think Mark, I expressed this to you the other day. I attended a Illinois State Indivisible meeting down in Springfield a couple of weeks ago, and we had the Illinois treasurer, Mike Frericks, I think his name was, big tall guy, give a presentation in the morning, and his presentation was almost identical to yours. The little twist on it was that Illinois has a fairly sizable investment that they make, and they have joined with other blue state treasurers to put pressure on companies that they want to invest in to have them ESG their portfolios. And they actually attend meetings, and they talk about not only ESG but diversity. And it was amazing when he originally stood up to talk. I was kind of thinking, based on that purposes of that meeting, what's he going to say that I'm going to enjoy? And I was thinking about maybe getting another donut. As it turned out, everybody listened closely, and the buzz was later on, boy, we have another tool if we all make sure that our government, our state follows these measures to invest in sustainable, environmental, socially adapt companies. A huge tool, more of a hammer, I got thinking. But I wanted to volunteer that with you. It's like you two guys are from one mind.
and I'm hoping we can get him to come on. So I think who's up next? Garrick, maybe you, and then Sonny?
This one's a little bit of a side rail question or concept. For the last 3 or 4 years, my electricity has been supplied by a company called My Hero Power. And I recently got an email last month that said they will no longer be doing business in Illinois. They supplied my power to my house through wind energy. Right now, I'm searching for a similar company so I don't have to go back to ComEd. Right now, I'm only seeing NextAmp and Clean Choice Energy. I know this isn't part of a conversation of investment, but does anybody know any other sources out there to supply your home electricity with something that's not coal related or fossil fuel related?
Well, just a quick answer for me. I'm with NextAmp, and I have no problem with them, but I would go to Citizens Utility Board, and because they're such a great resource, and they can probably answer any question, Garrick, that you have on this and direct you somewhere. So I hope maybe that works. If anybody else has a comment, let them put it in.
Yeah, I'm going to be on a Zoom tomorrow night in regards to that. And so I will ask them that, but I just wanted to throw it out there to this group as well. Thank you.
Yep. Sonny.
Yeah, Alex, thanks very much for responding and also for providing another resource. that I can bring back to my investment group, basically the finance committee of this not-for-profit organization. So when I got involved in this group, they had just they basically had an asset of about $5 million, and then one family donated another $30 million to this sleepy organization. So they have total assets now approaching about $40 million. Suddenly I jumped on this committee and I discovered that they, in fact, were embracing ESG investment, but their idea of embracing it, again, emphasis, this is a conservation organization. And their investments, they felt good that their investments were about 65% involved in ESG. And then they've since dropped back. And of course, they're looking at what I call a balanced portfolio. So I guess my question is, I'm an absolutist. You know, I want 100% involved in ESG. What do you think? Do you think that is a realistic goal? Or should I be satisfied if they're at least in the game with ESG?
You know, I think in today's world, we should be encouraged that they're at least in the game, and we need to keep pushing to be absolutist. It's not easy right now in this environment because ESG is being attacked, and we're also in kind of a flat to down market in general. But I do believe as the public in general learns more about ESG and becomes more comfortable with it, we have to become absolutists if we're going to save the planet here. You know, and I haven't been on all these calls before, but everything that I read in here is that we're behind the ball when it comes to climate change. And so we need to do everything that we can to hold corporations' feet to the fire and to push organizations to invest sustainably. Illinois has done a good job. Governor Pritzker, I believe, has done a good job pushing this. But yeah, there's a lot more that we can do and continue to push to be absolutist. I believe, and with our portfolios, I kind of tell people, let's not invest in any fossil fuels. If we're going to do this, let's invest purely in ESG and sustainable companies. So no, I think keep pushing, and we're going to get there. Politics has a lot to do with it, unfortunately. I think if Democrats had held the House, we could have got more done here. You see that all of that has completely stopped. You know, any progress that we made has completely stopped. So people do need to vote here in the next election. But we can vote with our pockets. And so, you know, if more and more people start to make the switch from regular investments to socially responsible investments, you know, that's a way where we can speak with our pocketbook. And as I said before, you know, even if you think that your particular investment is insignificant or significant, whichever one it is, if we all keep going in this direction, Wall Street will listen, because at the end of the day, you know, for them, it's all about profit, and something that affects their bottom line, they're going to pay attention and make changes.
So Alex, would it be fair to say that ESG seems to be, at least if we say it is or think that it is, it's minimizing risk, and it's the profits are sustainable and reasonable. So, and if you want to take high risk, stay in the fossil fuels, because there are going to be increasing costs to stay in that. So agreed.
ESG is an extra layer of research that goes into your investment portfolio. Now, look, oil companies are still profitable. You know, the argument can be made that if you look at it purely as an investment, that it's a good investment. But you know, if you have a choice on how you invest your money, if you can avoid them, why not do that? If it's something that you believe in, you know, that's what we can do to make the difference, because profit should not be the end all be all, right? We definitely want to make profit in our investments, but not at the expense of the planet and not at the expense of other people as well. So we just got to keep educating people. I think this is a good step. But the thing is, generally, the public is still just finding out about this type of investing. And I think that's what scares the oil companies, is that we're just at the beginning of this. And as more people start to feel comfortable with investing in ESG, you could see a much bigger movement. Right now, I'd love to see a poll of how many of the people that are part of your organization has even heard of ESG. And you guys are in the fight, for climate. And, it's my job and everyone's job to try to promote this and let people know that, hey, there are alternatives to the way that you invest, and you can make money. You could do it in a safe way that doesn't hurt the environment. And for me, that's a win-win. Yeah, and I put a bunch of the links here initially I put the links in the direct chat, but now I think everyone should be able to see the different links that we put up there. And look, the research shows that you could invest sustainably, and you're not missing out on any market returns. Anybody that says something different, that's fake news, as we say.
I had a question involving, and I see that Ori Pennick is on, she's muted, but is there an African Development Fund has a link to ESG? And if there isn't, why not? And one could be started. And Ori, if you want to unmute, do you have any comments about that? I don't know you.
Now, when I guess I have a question. When you say African, do you mean part of the African diaspora? Do you mean an African American business? I mean, it's there. There are a little bit of all of that. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
I think it's partly all of that, but it has. I know what China has been doing in Africa, and what they have been doing is causing huge problems and leaving huge environmental things to be cleaned up. And then they pull their slave workers out of there, and the African continent gets stuck with the cost. So I know that the African American community in this country is looking at that and going, wait a minute, that was our homeland. How do we get money to invest in that? So it's just kind of all that stuff. And
well, let me just say, and I'm sure Alex knows all of this, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And there are different countries in Africa that are, I won't say doing better, but not as overwhelmed by the Chinese infiltration as other parts of the country, of the continent. And so there are some companies in this country, African and non-African American companies. Ariel Capital is one. There are a few others that I know off the top that look into investments in parts of the continent that have not been overtaken by China. However, even in so doing that, it's not and I'm sure Alex, $1 in this country is, depending upon what country you're putting it in, Africa can be $100, almost $1,000. So they have to interpret what the investment is, how much is it, and even more so importantly, who will have final control? Will it be the governmental control in Africa of that country, or will it be the corporation from this country and Europe? And I'm sure you know this, London has done some things in Africa. So it's complicated. And if, I could maybe look up some people you could talk to, but I'm sure Alex knows there is no one country in Africa. Africa is a continent.
It's kind of, and just as speaking as a geographer, I think you could put, 3 or 4 North American continents in Africa, and it wouldn't fill it all up. So that's the size of the continent that you're looking at.
That's right.
And, but there's opportunity to do good work there.
Yes.
And that's sort of part underlying my question.
Yeah, and I'll look into it, but it's an opportunity, but it is highly complex.
Yes.
And that's what in some ways stops well-meaning investors in this country, because the complex nature of it, and quite frankly, the manner by which you can oversee it is what's so complex. You can donate it or give it, to the well-meaning or the established entity, but the structure to oversee it is what is diminished in some way. So it's complicated.
Yes. And Ari, thank you. Yes, I can speak a little bit to what you're saying. And yes, it is always complicated to invest per se in Africa, because it is a continent, and there's some countries in Africa are more open to investments than others. Some of them are in a state of war, and there's autocratic situations that are happening as well in certain countries in Africa. There are asset flows that go to different African countries that are what are called impact investing. And impact investing is a piece of socially responsible investing. And impact investing is a way to invest directly into either a country, if you wanted to invest in Africa, or you could invest directly into a community here in America as well. And so, there's a lot of impact investing that's going to minority communities here in the US. However, impact investing is what I would call a higher risk type of investment. I wouldn't tell you to take your 401k money and put it into impact investing. Impact investing makes sense for a portion of your portfolio, and I'll add the link to impact investing and how people can get involved in that. And you're basically making an investment in a particular community or country that needs the help, and by investing directly within that community or country, you're trying to make sure that money goes to the people that need it, and to the businesses that are in that country or community. So that's a piece of this. I agree with you, Ari. It's not easy to invest in Africa or in other certain areas, but I put in a link. Africa would fall under what are called emerging markets. And so there are what are called emerging market ESG funds. And so you can invest in funds that are environmentally, social, and government sound, but they're in emerging markets. Now, typically in our allocation, we'll put in 10 or 20% of somebody's overall portfolio into emerging markets. Emerging markets tend to be slightly higher risk than investing, say, in the S&P 500 here in the US. But there are times when emerging markets actually outperform the regular market. So you want to have that in your portfolio, in a well-balanced portfolio. You want to have emerging markets. And I would say, if you're interested in investing in Africa, the continent, emerging markets would be a good way to get started on that. And I put a link in there as well. And after the call, I'll put in something for the impact investing as well. Again, I think that most of the stuff that you're going to hear is not going to be accurate. People are shooting from the hip when they talk about ESG. ESG has been around for over 50 years. It's a sound way to invest your assets, and the returns are going to match up with any other returns, and in many ways are going to be better. So you're welcome. Anybody here is welcome to call me if they have questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions that they have. So that's all I have for now, I guess. But
and again, they could go on the what's the grouping of ESG advisors? What was that again?
So that was the Chartered SRI Counselor. I put that link in there.
Yep.
And I will also put in the impact investing in there right now. And I could also put in our website. I have a lot of information on our website as well that talks about ESG investing. So I'm happy to do that as well. I'll do that right now. And our number is on there. And people are, I'd love to talk to you individually, not necessarily to do business with me, but to answer your questions on ESG. I'm happy to talk about this more. So my website link's in there.
So if we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank Alex for coming on. It's great hearing what he has to say. I'm a believer in ESG stuff and SRI, and it's fun to get an update on where things are going, and how we can find out more about it. And thanks everybody for coming on.